are tracking major breaking news.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
If you watch the news regularly, you might feel like the world is ending every single day. There's a new war, a new law, a new problem every day. Crime is rising, violence is spreading, and chaos is on our doorstep. But it wasn't always like that. And I mean that the news wasn't always like that. Once upon a time, the news was short, focused on important events without sensationalizing it. And it ended once important events were covered. Now, news is 24/7. Every news story is breaking news, and every event is historic. So today, let's go over how the news turned into what it is today, and how one little company is trying to help fix the problem with today's news. But first and foremost, being a YouTuber, I gotta play the YouTube game, which means this is a quick reminder to please hit that like button on this video. Your like signals to the algorithm that this is a good video, and the algorithm will not suppress its reach. Okay, let's start. News started off really as spoken word. Back in the days before the printing press and written word, whenever people met, on a footpath or in a marketplace, around a well, they kept one another up to date. In time, elaborate oral systems developed for spreading the news further afield. Professions like runners and news criers were born, with the sole purpose of informing people of important events and stories. Even when written news became available, it took a long time for it to compete effectively with gossip and the word-of-mouth report. There were newspapers in 18th century London, but if you wanted to find out what was going on in the wider world, you generally did better to visit a coffee house. The first newspaper in the United States, Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic, spelled all weird like that, was suppressed by the Colonel Governor after one issue. In 1704, the Boston Newsletter began publication as a weekly issue by the postmaster. Then in 1719, the Boston Gazette was printed by James Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's brother. Newspapers became big in many nations around the world. As newspapers got more and more detailed and lengthy, consuming news slowly became part of people's habits. I'm sure most of you have seen the popular images where everyone's just sitting around reading a newspaper. News had people consumed. For many, it was a form of entertainment, but the newspaper was nothing as entertainment compared to what was about to come, the television. But okay, let's not get ahead of the story. After the newspaper came the radio. The 1920s saw the introduction of radio news broadcasts in the media. CBS and NBC introduced sponsored radio dramas and news broadcasts. And by 1940, 83% of homes had radios, and the majority listened often. The increasing popularity of radio made politicians aware of the medium's potential as a means of direct communication with voters. In the history of presidents, Warren Harding was the first to deliver radio addresses consistently. Even President Herbert Hoover used the radio, but to promote welfare and unemployment aid initiatives. Then came television, a medium that really changed news forever. Television irrevocably altered the media landscape by fusing the most compelling aspects of radio and motion pictures. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1939 New York World's Fair speech was the first officially recognized broadcast nationwide. The public initially hesitated to purchase televisions, but news reports during World War II ultimately swayed them. CBS's coverage of the conflict, complete with accompanying photos and maps, was a cut above the others. In 1951, however, with the debut of his news program, See It Now, Edward R. Murrow helped television journalism establish a firm foothold. The number of available channels increased alongside the growth of the television industry. Nightly newscasts debuted on national networks like CBS, NBC, and ABC, and eventually spread to local TV news stations and subsidiaries. With television, the entertainment aspect of news really took hold. Again, that's not to say people didn't watch the news for information, they did, but they kept on watching because it was more entertaining. It's quite exciting to see the news happen in front of your eyes. As more and more eyes flocked to news stations, the marketers' willingness to pay for that attention only went up. But the system and how stations made money was very skewed. Now, this is just my attempt at simplifying the system, so don't be too harsh in your rage comments down below if I miss some details in this oversimplification. Okay, so let's say the #1 ranked network got 20 million views. They might sell ads for $125,000 per minute. The #2 ranked network got, let's say, 19 million views, but they can only sell ads for $35,000 to $50,000. The scale of what you make was not linear in relation to the amount of views you got. Being #1 had outsized benefits. audience, and competing news networks were incentivized to find and exploit any edge possible to get people's eyeballs. The system was brutal, and network officials often publicly complained that they were its victims. As one network figured out that breaking news would get more attention, the next network would make every news story breaking news to trick the eyeballs back to their station. That's why every news story you see now is breaking news. Then another network figured out that being controversial drew in the audience. Then every network would run stories that boiled people's emotions. In the pursuit of the almighty dollar, the news was becoming less about news and more about keeping people glued to their television. Then, in the 1980s, everything changed with the launch of CNN and its 24-hour news cycle. News wasn't just morning and evening time stories anymore. It was 24/7, and slowly, every network had its own 24-hour news station. And this meant that news producers needed to fill not only one half-hour time slot, but 48 of these time slots every day. But was there really that much going on in the world? No, of course not. But in the chase of unending record profits and because of increasing competition, news channels had to keep coming up with the next big solution. With so many channels limited to the same world events over the same period of time, how could you make sure that the eyeballs came to your channel? The solution was sensationalism. Someone figured it out quickly, and then everybody just copied it. MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News, they report on the same news, but that doesn't mean they report the same stories. And while news is limited by the size of an event, the story is limited only by the size of the cable news producer's imagination. If you've ever heard the axiom, go big or go home in terms of corn farming in the 1970s, this also became true for cable news. And so, in this 24-hour news cycle, overblown stories reign supreme. And the world of overblown news is a scary one indeed. Every day, the sky is falling, and then, miraculously, we wake up to find that it has not yet fallen. But today, that will surely be the day. So you might be wondering, why do people still tune in? Most people know that most of the time, the news is just overblown. The reason people still tune in is because, well, it's kind of in our DNA to care about negative things. Our survival instincts make us focus on stuff that could be dangerous. The news cycle takes advantage of our biology, making every news story historic and the most dangerous threat our country has ever seen. Every new breaking news story is much worse than the last one, at least that's what we're told each and every time. And this has a pretty dark effect on the public. People know news is overblown, so they slowly start tuning out to most of the news. News companies notice this and they make their coverage even more sensational. People get scared and they watch the news again in hopes that they can protect themselves and their family against whatever new boogeyman that the news cycle is pushing. Other news companies notice this, so they try to one-up the first company by making their coverage even more sensational. And slowly, the public starts just tuning out this sensational coverage because they catch on that these stories are just overblown, and then the cycle just repeats itself. This cycle has another effect, where the public is becoming more and more uninformed, and you really can't blame them. News is supposed to make people knowledgeable about the events around them. It's not supposed to make them scared every single day. The biggest news companies are generating more revenue than ever, but the public is more uninformed than ever on important news around them. In the race to become number one, it feels like the news companies have forgotten what their actual job was supposed to be, and it feels like it all started with the TV. So maybe the solution is just to provide quick, bite-sized news to everyone and let them decide which news they want more details on. Maybe a better way would be to cover the good news and the bad news around the world and not just focus on the news that gets people scared. And so that got me thinking, would it be better if we just read our news instead of watching it, like in your email every day? And that's why I started Global Recaps, a geopolitics email newsletter. I truly think it could be part of the solution where people are informed by the news and not just scared by it. Also, news doesn't mean only bad news. That's why in the newsletter, I highlight good stuff that's happening around the world too, like the time when a Turkish stadium saw teddy bears rain down on the field in donation and support for children affected by the earthquakes. How much better would your day be if it started with positive and heartwarming news like this? Every weekday, an email is sent directly to your inbox, and in it, I cover the world's most important news in a short and concise manner with links to read more if you're interested in any specific news. I also take the most important news story and break it down in simple terms to explain how it affects you and everyone around you. These emails take less than 5 minutes to read, and they make you more informed about the world you live in, about the good, the bad, and the neutral. They're meant to keep you informed, not scared. If you think these emails can be helpful to you, then you can sign up now by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking on the link in the description. I will never send you spam, and I will never sell your email to any other company. The goal is to create a better way to share the news, with nothing less and nothing more. All right, thanks for watching.